Hey everybody, it's Saturday night and I was trying to think of some big exciting video to come up with, and I'm just not really in the mood and I don't really have anything particular on my mind. But I do need to get in here and do a little bit of work on my waterfall tank. I want to do a water change and I gotta trim up some of the plants, water the plants. I want to remove one of the ones that sort of passed its prime already, but we'll get to that as the video progresses. So this video is not going to be a big exciting Saturday night video. It is going to be a simple before and after water change video. We're going to get in here and do a little bit of work on my waterfall tank. I will change out the filter material that's in my pump. I'll get a lot of that water out of there. I don't know if it's the new plants I've added recently or what. I'm assuming it is, because since I've done that, I get like mad tannin stains within days. The water looks like weak tea. So I'm going to do a big water change and get the water nice and cleared up. And of course at the other side of this video we'll have the hanging light right there turned on. It's not on right now, and that'll give us a much better look into the tank. So there you go, there's your before and there's your after. So I did a really big water change like I said I was going to. And in fact, while I was in there, I shot a little bit of video when we were at the lowest point. So we're going to go ahead, cut over to that real quick. I'll give you a look at how much water we actually drained, a few little comments about the tank, and then we'll get back to the video. Alright everybody, I want to take a minute and get a little bit of video while we're in the process here. I just reversed the flow and we're now filling the tank back up. So I wanted to give you an idea of how much water I actually did take out of the tank. And I also wanted to show you the way I've got this rock positioned back here. Once upon a time, when I first set this tank up, I wasn't sure what was going to be in it or how I was going to have it. And so the idea was that it would be a shallow water tank. And that rock actually is in there for the purposes of just giving me a little more, something to look at. I've got water splashing off of a rock as it falls off the waterfall rather than simply just flowing into the tank. And that just gives me a little bit more activity and texture and so on and so forth. So that's why that rock is back there like that, for the effect you're actually seeing right now. But over time I decided I like the tank full, and that rock is now just an underwater structure. So there you go, that's just a little look at the in-between. So let's get back to the rest of the video. Alright, so after doing the water change, I wound up removing both of the plants over here on the left. You'll notice how much more open it is. And in fact, I did a little more than that, but we'll get to that in a second. The first thing I noticed was when I pulled the really big bleeding heart out of back here, because it was pretty much done blooming and it was, finished up for the year. And just picking up the planter and carrying it into the other room, I could feel things crawling on my arm. And so I checked, and of course it was aphids. And so I looked, and I did indeed have aphids that were on some of the stuff that was touching in here. You can see how shriveled up a lot of this is. That's partially because of all the light it's getting, but it's also partially because of aphids that were on it. So I wound up having to use my soapy water. I sprayed all this down really thoroughly, and I sprayed all my big Rex begonia down that was up here and everything. And apparently when I was walking around the tank and moving around, I must have bumped it and just completely broke it off. You can see the section right there is completely missing. This section had broken out of the middle of it, and now I've got a section that's about, it was up to about here. So all of that whole section is now sitting in one of my grow out buckets, and tomorrow I'll get around to putting that in another planter, because this is another one I'm actually considering sticking that in the soil. If I planted in soil up to there, I would be willing to bet we'd actually see new shoots come out of these nodes right here, or come out of this joint right here. So we'll see if we can get another Rex begonia out of that. But it's really that easy. You can just cut that, cut it, stick it in some soil and water it, and within a week or two it'll start developing roots and growing. So that's another thing I need to do over here with my geraniums. They're getting a little out of control, and then this geranium back here is growing so far out, I probably ought to just cut these off and get some new cuttings out of that. And this, of course, is the Rex begonia. That's what it looks like when it gets a little bit bigger and taller. I've got this one kind of propped up against my branch to sort of hide this broken jagged edge that doesn't look too natural, but when it's like that, it just looks like a piece of wood over there. So, other than the water change, I also did change the filter. I wiped the glass down. I got a ton of mulm and all that kind of crud out of there. While I was in there, I pulled another rock out. It was in the back, in the corner over here, and once upon a time it was probably in there to help hold this piece of woodwork down, but it was no longer necessary, and it was just preventing me from vacuuming some of the mulm out of the bottom. So I went ahead and pulled that out of there and opened the tank up just a little bit wider. You can kind of see how I've got a little more access in the back to get the gravel vac in there. I also added one more little extension piece to the filter just to bring the filter intake a little bit lower. You can see all the mulm and crud that collects underneath of it. I'm hoping as fish swim through there, or even if I get in there just once in a while with my hand and swirl it around, I'll be able to kick some of that up and it'll get sucked up into the filter. So while I was in there, I also pulled the filter intake out and gave it a good rinse and cleaning. And then, of course, I changed the filter pad on that filter while I was in there. So on the good news side, the Ludwigia I put in here recently is really doing well. I'm really happy with how much that's turning upright and growing towards us here. Actually, let me turn this light off. It's just so overpowering. It washes my camera out. I don't know anything about photography, so my camera is set on automatic, and it does its best, but when you've got all these varying degrees of light, there's only so much a phone can do. So you can see that Ludwigia is growing in. It looks really good. Even this stuff down here is turning upwards and turning towards the light. So I'm really digging that. I've got it down here. I got the root is actually tucked in up here underneath of this water sprite. And then I've got it sort of tucked into that little channel back there, and then you can see that's growing up and out. So that's exciting. And then down here I've got my sweet woodruff from out in the yard. I've got a bunch of different stuff in here, but this stuff is sweet woodruff, and you can see I've already got my first little dainty white flower on it, so I'm hoping that'll spread out and grow across there a little more, and we'll get a little bit more in the way of flowers, and eventually I'm hoping that'll give me more of a sort of green carpet coming down towards the water's edge there. That's about all I can think of. I also went around, I took some of the water from the tank. Oh, that's another thing I can mention. I did take some water from the tank, and I fed all the plants that were around it, all the ones we just looked at, including my arrowhead plant up there that I thought would be a big, long, trailing plant, and I would have, you know, stuff, but it's just growing really dense and compact up there for some reason, and that's it. So, I don't know how much good watering them with my tank water is, because that's the same amount of tannins. That's the same amount of nitrates I have in my tap water, and this is from my before water. This is before the water change. I had less than 5 parts per million nitrates in there. So I'm sure there's other compounds in there that the plants could use in some fashion. There's probably some phosphates or something. I'm sure it's not bad for the plants to use this water, but it's certainly not a big nitrogen boost, because there's almost no nitrogen compounds in this water at all. So for these plants, I really do still need to either use water from one of my other tanks that has a little more in the way of nitrates, or I need to just simply use my good old handy dandy Jack's all-purpose fertilizer that has all the trace nutrients and everything, and I love that stuff. It's great fertilizer. So anyway, there you go. That's a look at everything. Pretty soon my daylilies will be sending up some flower spikes, so look forward to that, and make sure you're subscribed, that way you won't miss anything else I got coming up. And don't forget, of course, this one here is my 40-gallon waterfall tank. So I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you on the next one.